The jagged mountains of Arvath had always been a place where few dared to venture. Legends whispered of hidden caves and ancient powers, of weapons lost to time, and of secrets that mortals were never meant to find. Jaren, a young explorer with a restless mind and a fearless heart, had heard these stories countless times. But unlike others, he didn't see them as warnings. To him, they were challenges, mysteries to solve. His boots crunched against the rocky slope as he climbed higher, wind tearing at his clothes and hair, the clouds below him thick like cotton. He had been searching for days, following an old map he had discovered in a forgotten library, a map that led to something no one had seen for centuries. Jaren paused at the edge of a ridge, scanning the mountains around him. The wind howled, carrying the scent of whetstone and cold air. Somewhere deep below, the mouth of a cave yawned in darkness. His heart raced with anticipation. Legends said that the caves of Arvath were guarded by more than just nature. They were alive in ways people couldn't understand. But Jaren had a confidence born of youth and determination. He had faced storms, avalanches, and wild creatures before. Nothing would stop him now. He began his descent carefully, feet finding small footholds on slippery rock. The cave's entrance grew larger with each step, a shadowed mouth leading into unknown depths. Inside, the air was cooler, damp, and smelled of earth and age. Water dripped rhythmically from stalactites, echoing through the cavern in soft, haunting tones. Jaren switched on a small light on his helmet, illuminating the walls. Strange carvings glimmered faintly. Symbols that seemed almost alive etched into the stone in patterns that moved under his gaze. They were intricate, alien, yet human-made in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. As he walked further, he noticed a faint glow from deeper inside. His pulse quickened. The light was soft at first, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger with each step. Then he saw it, a sword, ancient and perfect, lodged in a stone pedestal. Its hilt shimmered as if it had absorbed the essence of the cave itself, and curiously it felt warm. Even after 500 years, the metal radiated heat as if it were alive. Jaren's hand trembled slightly as he approached. He knelt in front of it, studying every detail. The blade was unlike any weapon he had seen. Strange markings ran along its length, glowing faintly. The hilt was carved with symbols that pulsed in time with something he could not see. He reached out, hesitating for only a moment before his fingers brushed the metal. The instant he touched it, a shiver ran through him, and the cave seemed to breathe. A whisper filled his mind, soft, sibilant, almost like the hiss of a snake. "You shouldn't have touched it." Jaren froze, his eyes wide. The voice was not coming from anywhere in the cave, it came from inside him. It was old, ancient, and yet familiar in a way he couldn't explain. A strange warmth spread through his fingers into his arm. The sword pulsed like it had a heartbeat, a rhythm that matched his own. Shadows around him twisted, stretching across the walls like living creatures. His mind began to reel with images not his own. Armies clashing under alien skies, banners burning, warriors falling. Battles he had never seen in times long before humanity recorded history, passed before his eyes. The sword had seen everything, remembered everything. Jaren tried to pull his hand back, but it was as though the sword had claimed him. A faint pressure held him there, but it was not pain, more like a warning, a challenge. He realized then that the sword was more than a weapon. It was a sentinel, a guardian of power that could be used to create or destroy, and it had chosen to awaken now in his hands. From the shadows, shapes began to move. They were humanoid at first glance, but darker, twisted, shifting. The cave seemed to bend and stretch around him. Then a figure stepped forward, more solid than the shadows, armor black and gleaming, eyes like coals burning in darkness. It was a wraith, a creature born of fear and time itself, meant to guard what Jaren had disturbed. Its voice was like the hiss he had heard, but louder, filled with menace. "You should not have touched it, human. You awaken what should sleep." Jaren's heart pounded in his chest. He could have run, but instinct told him this was not a choice. The sword in his hand hummed warm and comforting, as if encouraging him to stay. The wraith lunged, moving with impossible speed, but Jaren felt something shift within him. A courage he had never known surged forward. He held the sword out instinctively, feeling its weight and power, sensing that the blade responded not to fear but to resolve. The wraith recoiled, hissing in frustration. "You cannot wield this power," it whispered. But Jaren, feeling the strength of humanity itself in his bones, pushed forward. His mind cleared and he understood that courage, ingenuity, and determination were more than traits. They were keys. The sword was alive, yes, but it was waiting for someone who could match its legacy. He took a deep breath, centering himself. The warmth from the sword flowed into his arm, up through his chest and into his mind. The visions of past battles sharpened, giving him insight into tactics, strategy, and the stories of heroes who had wielded the sword before him. Yet he did not feel consumed by them. Instead, he felt aligned with them. The sword had chosen a worthy hand, and now it awaited his decision. As the wraith circled him, the cave seemed to pulse with energy. The walls glowed faintly, revealing complex circuitry etched into the stone. They were not just carvings, they were conduits, a network of energy that connected the sword to something larger, older than humanity itself. Jaren realized he had stepped into a place where human courage intersected with alien technology, a combination so rare that it had taken centuries to manifest. The wraith hissed again, eyes blazing, and struck forward. Jaren dodged instinctively, sword clashing with shadow. Sparks erupted, not of fire, but of light and energy. He could feel the blade responding, guiding him, amplifying his reactions. Every movement became sharper, more precise. He had never felt power like this, yet it was not foreign. It was a part of him, a reflection of his own resolve, magnified 1,000-fold. Hours seemed to pass in seconds. He danced with the wraith through the cave, each strike and parry revealing more of the sword's potential. Then, with a surge of understanding, he realized the truth. The wraith was not merely an enemy. It was a test, a manifestation of fear and doubt. The sword was alive, but it did not act alone. It required a human spirit strong enough to direct it, to master it. Jaren steadied himself, taking a breath. He remembered the stories of humans who had faced impossible odds, who had survived through ingenuity, courage, and hope. He let those memories flow through him. The warmth of the sword intensified and light burst from its edge, forcing the wraith back into the shadows. It screamed, not in pain but in frustration. "You are not ready." It hissed, fading into the darkness. The cave fell silent. The sword's warmth settled into a gentle hum. Jaren dropped to his knees, exhausted but exhilarated. The carvings on the walls pulsed once more, faintly like a heartbeat. He understood that he had passed the first trial, but this was only the beginning. The sword had awakened because it had chosen him, and now the path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and full of challenges that could test the limits of his humanity. He rose slowly, gripping the sword firmly. Outside, the sky was painted with the first light of dawn, the clouds glowing pink and gold. Jaren knew he could not turn back. The sword was a key, a weapon, and a guide. And somewhere, in the shadows of the cave and beyond, forces older than memory were already stirring. He took one last look at the carvings on the walls, memorizing every symbol, every pattern. Then, with steady steps, he began his journey back through the cave, ready to face whatever the world or the sword had in store for him next. The mountains of Arvath were quiet, but Jaren felt a pulse in the air that was different from the wind or the clouds. The sword in his hand hummed softly, a constant reminder that he was no longer just an explorer. He was something more, something chosen. Its warmth spread through him, steady and alive, and he felt every step as if the world itself recognized the weapon he carried. Descending the rocky slope, Jaren could see the valley below waking under the morning sun. Birds flew, clouds drifted, and yet there was a tension he could sense, something unseen. The sword's warmth had shifted into a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. He realized that it wasn't just alive, it was aware. The cave had awakened something in him, but now the world outside would react to it too. He remembered the wraith, the dark figure that had tried to claim the sword. Its hiss, its warnings, they had not been idle threats. Whatever had created the sword had built guardians to test and protect it. Jaren clenched his jaw. He did not intend to flee. Humans had survived the impossible before, and he would not be the one to fail. As he reached the valley floor, movement caught his eye. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees. He raised the sword instinctively. The light from its blade extended slightly, cutting through the dimness. Then figures emerged, humanoid but unlike any human he had seen. Their skin glimmered faintly under the sunlight, pale with a subtle metallic sheen, and their eyes reflected intelligence and caution. They spoke, but not in words he understood. The sword vibrated in his hand, and suddenly a faint sound reached him, translating their meaning directly into his mind. "You have awakened the blade." You are not of our kind. Why do you carry it? Jaren took a deep breath. I didn't know it was meant to sleep. But I will protect it. I will not let it fall into the wrong hands. The creatures studied him silently as if weighing his spirit. The sword pulsed brighter, and he could feel a connection forming between him and the weapon. A bridge not only of power, but of trust. One of the figures, taller and cloaked in a deeper shade than the rest, stepped forward. It gestured, and the forest parted slightly, revealing a path lined with ancient stones, covered in moss but carved with symbols matching those inside the cave. Jaren realized the path was leading him somewhere. His instincts told him to follow. The sword's warmth surged as if urging him forward, and he understood that his journey was not yet over. He had passed the first trial, but the real challenge was still ahead. Hours passed as he walked the winding path. The valley gave way to cliffs, waterfalls, and deep rivers. With each step, the sword shared flashes of history. Battles fought, alliances formed, and enemies defeated. It was a record of human courage, of alien wisdom, and of the rare moments when the two had met. The sword had been created not only to defend but to teach, to guide a worthy wielder through trials that demanded intelligence, bravery, and heart. By mid-afternoon, Jaren reached a plateau overlooking an enormous canyon. Across it, in the far distance, a city of strange design shimmered under the sunlight. Towers rose like fingers of metal and stone, some smooth and modern, others jagged and ancient. The sword vibrated with urgency. Jaren knew instinctively that his next test awaited there. He began to descend into the canyon. The air grew warmer, heavier, and the hum of the sword intensified, almost like a heartbeat echoing in the vast open space. Suddenly, the shadows he had seen in the cave began to gather again, coalescing into forms darker than the canyon walls. The wraiths, or something like them, were not alone. They had multiplied, and they were coming for him. Jaren tightened his grip on the sword. Every human lesson he had learned, the careful observation of danger, the courage to act, and the ability to adapt, flashed through his mind. He had survived storms, avalanches, and treacherous cliffs. These creatures born of fear and darkness would be no different. They attacked in waves, moving with unnatural speed. Jaren dodged, swung the sword, and felt its energy channel through him. Every strike he made was precise, each movement guided by the centuries of experience stored within the blade. He realized that the sword responded not just to touch, but to intent. Fear made it resist. Courage made it powerful. The more he trusted himself, the stronger the sword became. Hours felt like minutes, and Jaren fought tirelessly. Then from the distance, a deep rumble echoed across the canyon. The ground shook, and a wave of energy surged through the air. Jaren paused, sensing that something ancient and immense was awakening, something far beyond even the wraiths. The sword pulsed violently, and he understood. He had reached the threshold of the final trial. The city across the canyon shimmered and shifted, revealing its true form, a fortress of energy and stone, designed to test those who carried the sword. Its gates opened slowly, revealing corridors lined with glowing runes and chambers filled with illusions and challenges. Jaren stepped forward, sword ready, heart steady. Each challenge would measure his intelligence, courage, and humanity. The sword would guide him, but only he could succeed. Inside, the first chamber tested his mind. Illusions of fear and despair rose around him, visions of failure and death. But Jaren drew on every human instinct, observation, logic, and hope. He moved through the illusions, ignoring the voices that whispered doubt. Each step reinforced his connection with the sword. The warmth became a steady light, guiding him through darkness, and for the first time, Jaren realized that human determination could shape not just outcomes but reality itself when wielded alongside the right tools. The next chamber tested his heart. Projections of loved ones, friends he had never met, and strangers in danger filled the space. The sword's energy surged, echoing with the emotions within him. Jaren felt their pain, fear, and hope. He could have turned away, but his compassion, his willingness to act for others, strengthened the sword even further. The chamber faded, and he understood that true power was not just in skill or courage. It was in empathy and choice. Finally, he entered the last chamber, a massive hall that stretched beyond sight. The wraiths reappeared, more numerous than before, their forms sharper and more threatening. At the center, a shadowed figure waited, taller and more fearsome than any he had encountered. Its voice boomed, echoing off the walls. "You have endured tests of mind and heart. But can you master the spirit of humanity itself? Jaren felt the sword pulse violently, its warmth now spreading through his entire body. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, not in fear but in defiance. Every lesson, every act of courage, every choice to protect and endure, he brought it all to the forefront. The wraiths attacked, but the sword's energy flared, creating shields of light that deflected the shadows. The figure lunged, but Jaren moved with perfect instinct, every motion guided by his own humanity and the centuries of knowledge within the blade. Finally, he struck. The sword glowed brighter than ever, a living pulse of energy, and the shadowed figure screamed as it dissolved into light, scattering across the chamber. The wraiths vanished and silence fell. The sword's warmth settled, gentle now as if satisfied. Jaren dropped to one knee, exhausted but triumphant. He had survived the trials not because of any supernatural ability, but because of qualities all humans possessed: courage, intelligence, compassion, and determination. As he exited the fortress, dawn broke across the canyon. The city and its trials faded, leaving only the mountains and the valley below. Jaren stood tall, the sword warm in his hands, and realized that he had been chosen not just to wield power, but to carry responsibility. The dark voice from the cave was gone, replaced by a quiet resonance of respect. He understood now that the sword would follow him, guide him, and grow stronger through his actions. But it would never override the will of a human who chose to act with courage. The journey back down the canyon was long, but Jaren felt ready for whatever the world could throw at him. The sword had shown him the limits and the potential of humanity. He had been tested not for glory or power, but to prove that the human spirit could endure, overcome, and even master forces older than memory. When he finally emerged from the mountains, the sun was high, and the world stretched out before him wide and open. The sword hummed softly, as if acknowledging his victory, and Jaren knew this was only the beginning. Humans had always survived the impossible. Now, with the sword in his hands, they could shape the impossible itself. Jaren set off across the plains, ready to face what came next. The mountains of Arvath faded behind him, but the lessons, the sword, and the strength he had discovered would remain forever. He was no longer just an explorer. He was a guardian, a human who had faced darkness and emerged stronger, a symbol of the courage and resilience that defined his species. And in the warmth of the sword, Jaren could feel that humanity itself had been given a chance to rise once more.